Music composers get inspired in different ways. One of the best ways, in my opinion, is when you find a sound or an instrument that you just can't shake. There's something about it that you have to see it through. So that particular instrument for me was a drum kit inside of battery called Shaolin. Therefore the name of the piece. Shaolin isn't based on any martial arts style or kung fu or anything like that. It's literally just named after the kit I found. And it's a perfectly named kit because it definitely has that East meets West sort of feel to it. After I started dragging the sounds around, there was something about the kick with the little bell chime that just really inspired me. So from there I went on and I found some other Eastern instruments. I picked up a Japanese koto and shamisen VST and I started putting the pieces together. Shaolin covers all of the instrument families to some degree. You have a lot of percussion, that's really present in the piece. You have a lot of strings, and then there's some horns to cover brass, and there's a single flute in there to add a little flavor, so it rounds off the entire spectrum of the instrument families. As a music composer, you always ask a little bit of your audience. How much time am I going to require you to listen to this? How much am I going to require you to focus while you're listening to it? Is it something you need to concentrate on to really get the most out of, or can you just relax and enjoy it? And that's the great thing about Shaolin. You can really sit back in any scenario, a slower tempo but still interesting and intriguing. I don't ask a lot of the listener when it comes to this particular piece. Now, where it all started to come together for me was with the shamisen. Now, there's a general rule with reverb that if you overdo it, your piece can sound really amateur. It's a tool to hide a lot of the mistakes when it comes to writing. With the shamisen, however, I cranked the reverb all the way up, made it as wet and lush and heavily mixed as I possibly could, and it created this wonderful sound. I mean, you could easily take that and sample it and put it in a hip-hop track or a pop track. It's just that perfect little stab sound, that perfect filler, that perfect intriguing thing in the verse to keep the listener going. It's awesome. Another thing I really love doing in my tracks whenever I can is introducing a non-musical element in a musical way. So in the past I've used more industrial sounds, machinery, and things like that. In this piece there's an option in the shamisen VST where it's a scraping sound. Like imagine a guitar with a guitar pick just scraping along the string. And that was another element where I cranked the reverb all the way up, made it super lush. And it's this, again, it's just this element that doesn't sound musical, but it's rhythmic enough, it works, it flows in the beat, and it just grabs your attention when you hear it. So any non-musical thing to add in there to add a little bit of flavor and to put a little stamp on it that this is your piece, this isn't some generic thing, this is, hey, that's my shamisen scrape in there. So that's really cool. So in the first verse, the koto very much takes on the theme of the piece. Now in verse 2, we take that same theme, but we remove a little bit of the minor elements, make it a little more major so that we can build this structure out of it, this sort of verse bridge thing. It sounds kind of like a bridge and a verse mixed in. And it builds in a very pleasing way. I moved a lot of things around so that it didn't quite sound so square, so that it's not quite so obvious, so that you can't quite listen ahead and just see obviously where it's going. Just something to break up the square nature of the writing. The piece has three main percussion elements. You've got the main beat, the main percussion that happens in the intro and the verse, the obvious nature of it, the Shaolin kit that the whole piece is based on. But then going into the chorus, I introduced taiko drums. The taiko drums just have a perfect fit because I'm using so many other Japanese instruments. And it's nice to drop away the beat for a second, let the listeners forget about it, experience something new for a few measures. And this is a great instrument because you don't have to ask your computer to do a lot of work to get a really big sound. I mean, these drums just sound big with just a couple of keystrokes. You know, on the keyboard itself for that whole section, I think I maybe used 2 or 3 keys, you know, because it's a virtual instrument, so you're looking at a keyboard. You know, the main kick might be C, and then the little fillers might be like F and F sharp. So I only really used 3 keys, or if you have percussion pads, I use some of those too. But it's really super simple to get this sound. Like I said, it's only 3 drums, and the big thing is choosing where you want those big hits. Where do you want the big rhythmic moments to happen? So for this piece, it was boom, boom, boom. That's it. After you have those down, fill in the rest, you know, play with a couple other drums and see where they fit inside of those structures. You can do it on a separate track if you want, or if you can just, you know, memorize where you want those big hits, you can do it all together. This is composing these days. So the taiko drums play out for a few measures, and then you bring in the Shaolin kit underneath the taiko drums, and it just rounds off the percussion in this amazing way in the chorus. It's a great way to build interest. You know, for a few measures you've changed it up. You have this taiko kit, but then you bring back the original kit on top of it, and it has this really beautiful and satisfying groove to it. Then the third percussion element comes in the way of a very low-end hip-hop kit. You first hear it in verse 2, and then it comes back in that last chorus, the big chorus, and it really fills out the sound. It really brings out the low end. It's something enjoyable for the listener, because you have these, you know, fairly big drums throughout, but they're not really low-end thud kind of drums. So when that deep kick comes in, it's really satisfying. So at the end of the chorus, you have these two French horns that come in and they play the same line, but then break off into a small melody near the end and round off this chord in a really beautiful way. And then for the woodwinds, you just have this single Japanese flute that just adds so much color. There's certain moments where it just creeps in and adds this sort of just crispy but mellow sort of color to the piece. It's really nice. So where this piece really comes together for me in a satisfying way is when the chorus builds up in the last half of the piece, that very last chorus. So in the final section of Shaolin, you have chorus, but then I repeat the chorus, try to make it a bigger chorus. So that's when that low-end hip-hop kick comes back in, but then you also have these staccato strings and just round off everything in a really satisfying way. The whole piece builds up to that moment for me. I love it so much. And then just like when the chorus ends the first time, you have the satisfying drop off where all the sound cuts off except for that original kit mixed in with that lush reverb shamisen, and that's how the piece ends. So those are the program notes for Shaolin, and I definitely think I haven't shaken these instruments. I definitely see more of those instruments in my future.